Hello, and welcome to Senior Speak New Hampshire. My name is Dan Wise, your host for this show, and a volunteer for AARP, which helps to sponsor Senior Speak New Hampshire. It's the first month of 2025, so Happy New Year. This is also the first month of a new legislative session here in Concord and the start of a new presidency in Washington, D.C. And AARP is very involved in advocating for folks over 50 in the state capitals and in Washington. And AARP is many things to many people. It's a fancy magazine of fun social events here in your community, and also a great website. AARP.org has fantastic resources on any subject, and it is an important voice on issues that affect everyone, how we live and how we age in this great democracy of ours. I'm going to quote from the AARP mission. Our mission is simply to enhance the quality of life for all as we age. We champion positive social change and deliver value through advocacy, information, and service. And we do it on the national and at the state level. The vision that drives us is a society in which all people live with dignity and purpose and fulfill their goals and dreams. And so, as I said, this translates into activity at the state capitals and in D.C. And here in New Hampshire, Mike Padmore leads New Hampshire's AARP New Hampshire's advocacy. So, Mike, welcome to Senior Speak New Hampshire.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. So, Mike, give us your title. What's your title with AARP, and kind of how do you see your responsibilities here as one of the few staff people on the staff here at AARP?
Sure.
In the Hampshire office.
Yeah. Well, my name is Mike, and I'm the Associate State Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach for AARP New Hampshire. And so, what I do is my job really focuses on working with our members and our volunteers across the state, and then understanding how can we advocate on behalf of the issues that we know that our members care about. And I know we'll probably talk about all of what goes into that and all the different issues that we work on. But really, my focus is how can we bring our members' voices forward to our decision makers in Concord and also in DC.
Okay, great. And let's talk a little bit about the scale or the scope of AARP. Mm-hmm. So how many members does AARP have in New Hampshire, and how many people are sort of active in it? Do you know?
Yeah, so we have 212,000 members across the state. We have over 150 active volunteers in the state, and they serve in a variety of different roles with our organization, spanning from the advocacy work that I do, our voter engagement work, which is sort of our work working with some of the candidates that are running for office and educating them. But then we've got a speakers bureau that will go across the state and talk to go into different communities and talk about different issues and talk about maybe fraud prevention or things like that, just from an educational standpoint. We've got tax aid volunteers that help folks with their taxes. So it really spans a variety of different ways. And I think what our focus is how can we work with our members as much as possible? How can we kind of bring value to them? And a lot of that is us trying to serve as maybe a resource for a lot of them for the things that we know that they care about. I think you also maybe asked how we communicate with them. And so, we do that in a variety of different ways. I mean, we've got our website, of course, that has sort of a landing page of all the different things that we do. But we, have a pretty steady cadence of emails that we'll send to our members. That is a mix of information just generally about some of the work that we're doing. But also, it can be certain actions maybe that they can take from like an advocacy standpoint from some of the work that we're doing. Some other things that we do which are pretty cool. One that I'll highlight is this thing called a teletown hall. And so some folks, that are watching this, may have gotten a call from us, for these teletown halls, but What they are is they're an opportunity for us to have some sort of a program, usually a guest that is part of the Teletown Hall. A great example of this is we had Secretary of State, New Hampshire Secretary of State, Dave Scanlon on, and this was back in, I think it was the summertime before the election last year. And it was really an opportunity for Secretary of State Scanlon to come on and just talk about how folks can go vote. Make sure that they have information, resources. But the cool thing is because it's a Teletown Hall and folks are kind of called, they can actually ask questions. So if there are certain questions that they have for whoever that guest is, they can press a certain button on their phone and then be able to ask that question. And so that's one. And then the other thing is we're always consistently doing different events and webinars. And so, some good examples of that, actually kind of going back to the election again, we had this event called Advocacy Across Ages, and it was a forum with the gubernatorial candidates, both the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate for governor here in New Hampshire. And it was an opportunity for our members to hear from these two candidates, talk about the issues that we know our members care about. And so we try to do different things like that are ways that give us as staff opportunities to communicate and share information, but also give our members an opportunity to learn and maybe ask questions as well about some of the stuff we know they care about.
I want to point out that was my introduction. I've been really only active in AARP about a little more than 2 years right now, and the way I got started was they had a training event in I think they called it Advocacy Boot Camp or something like that. And they had a day program that was about how things work at the State House, and then it was also about, well, what are the issues that we are working on, how do we do things, and that sort of thing. And that was kind of how I got introduced. And it was, you got to feel like, I'm getting introduced to this, and very welcoming atmosphere, and then it was also, I think one of the things that was interesting was, instead of being about politics, about, oh, we're going to line up behind one candidate, it was about, these are the values that we have, these are the issues that we're talking about, and that appealed to me, rather than sort of getting aligned with a particular candidate or party. It was about the issues and about just topic areas. So I think that's the next thing I wanted to ask about is, well, what are the kind of the key issues that you're going to be working on sort of as a portfolio for the upcoming session of the legislature?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, and right off the top, you alluded to this. AARP, we're a nonpartisan, issue-based organization, so we don't endorse candidates. When we are working on our issues during the election, and then certainly during the legislative session, our focus is on the issues themselves. That's really our primary focus: is how do we bring forward these issues, educate our candidates who are running for office, and then once we have our folks in the legislature, how do we educate them on some of these different issues? And so that's a really key point, and something that I certainly appreciate, and I think it benefits us in when we get into these legislative sessions where we're able to work with folks on both sides of the aisle. And so what I'll do is I'll sort of start from sort of a national perspective. Social Security, and really protecting Social Security, that is our bedrock issue at AARP. We want to work with our elected officials to make sure that they understand the importance of this program to our members, and that they do everything that they can to ensure to protect this moving forward. And so that's something that we're going to continue to work on from here on out. I don't think that's an issue that's really ever going to change for us. I think we see an incredible amount of value for that program for our members, and so we're going to do everything we can to advocate on behalf of that. Another really key issue, and I think it's another bedrock issue for us, because I think we're one of the organizations that really focuses on this, is supporting family caregivers. I love working on this issue because I find that it is so personal to so many people that we work with. What this is it's folks caring for their loved ones, and so what we do is, our focus is, how can we increase resources for family caregivers in the state and across the country. And so whether that's time, money, resources, we want to support policies that will make family caregivers' jobs easier, because I think whenever anyone finds themselves in that situation when they're caring for a loved one, you're learning it as you go. And there's no handbook, on how to do it. Every situation is different. And so what we really try to do is focus on, well, how can we just make that job easier and provide resources to them so that they can care for their loved ones. So those are certainly, and really I think all of these issues in so many ways, they are sort of a national focus. The family caregiving issue, that is certainly something that we are going to be working on here at the state level and have been working on at the state level. Some other state issues, that we're going to be focused on are, and this is, I think so present now, and this is not only here in New Hampshire but across the country, is housing affordability and accessibility. I think that we are seeing as a country, and again here in New Hampshire, an issue with folks being able to find accessible and affordable housing. And so, and that, that is impacting our members certainly, but it is impacting really everybody.
Yeah, and speaking of that for a minute, I think some folks think of that as, oh, that's a young person issue because, hey, my kids can't find an affordable house to start out with. But it's really not. It's really an issue for over 50 folks too. Can you elaborate on that a little bit as to what the situation is for folks that are getting older?
Yeah, I think one, a situation that comes right to mind is folks that are looking to downsize. If someone, either owns, a couple bedroom home or is renting, a larger home, figuring out, how can they downsize more easily. And, I think the challenge is that, there's a phrase that I've been hearing a lot lately, which is housing diversity, ensuring that there are not just a bunch of 3-bedroom larger homes available for folks to be able to buy or rent, but that there's 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom homes, that there's studios available, because I think that whether it's our members or whether it's young people or whoever, there are so many different situations depending on kind of where you are in life that you need to have a diverse stock of housing in our communities. And so I think that's really the key part here, is ensuring that there are, that's why I think housing accessibility is part of this. It's not just the affordability part, but are there enough homes in some of these different communities around the state? Then there's another aspect, which is maybe rural versus urban. I think some of the more rural towns are having challenges, ensuring that maybe there's some of that housing diversity in there too. And so I think so that's I think a key thing for us. And one of the things that we're working on and that we're figuring out how we can move this forward is accessory dwelling units. The easy way to think about this is kind of like an in-law suite almost.
The mother-in-law,
mother-in-law right.
apartment or unit, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like what is really cool about ADUs, the acronym ADUs, is they really can contribute to that diversity and certainly can help folks downsize, where I think what we found, in some cases, maybe someone who has owned their home, outright, and now is looking to maybe downsize into an ADU and then rent out their main home, or it could be an example of caregiving too, where you have someone who maybe they're an older parent, and to be closer to their caregivers, which might be their son or daughter or another family member, being able to maybe move into that ADU and being close by. So I think that it's something that we really want to explore. We want to work with our local towns and communities, and if we can work with our state officials as well, we're really optimistic.
Yeah, I'm working on developing a show specifically on ADUs coming up, because I think that's a real interesting topic. And one of the things I think is that it'll be helpful to have a practical perspective on ADUs of like, okay, I'm a homeowner and I'm not a developer. I'm not sure how I would whether how my property would fit in to having an ADU. Where would it go, and how complicated a process would it be, economically and from a construction point of view and a zoning point of view and all that. So I'm looking forward to doing something on that. And there's actually another presentation that I heard in another context, was someone who talked about the housing issue as housing and care issue, because folks, as they age, they are going to need, they may need a level of care. They're going to need more accessibility in terms of just, are there going to be enough houses where there aren't steps in the way, or there's wide hallways, and then what is the access to resources for care? Do we make sure that we have, and that gets into other issues like the workforce and things like that, which is also an affordable housing issue as well. Direct care workforce, will they have a place to live themselves nearby in our communities?
No, I think we've certainly seen the
fascinating about volunteering with AARP on these issues is it's a wide view of things.
Yeah. I think you brought up workforce, and I think certainly our business community is eager for solutions, right? And so I think what our goal is when it comes to this whole housing issue is how can AARP be a partner in just helping to identify and work towards solutions when it comes to that. So we're real excited about that work.
So then there's a couple other issues on the portfolio for AARP. In New Hampshire and nationally, because that's something else we'll talk about. But what other issues do you see coming up this year in New Hampshire?
Yeah, so I think an issue that we have been working on for forever, and will again be another one that we continue to work on moving forward, is prescription drugs and just the cost of prescription drugs, and how can we help to drive that cost down. And I think one of the things that we have supported and that we are hopeful is just a great resource for folks here in New Hampshire in identifying solutions to lower the cost of prescription drugs is the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. It was created a few years ago through a bill that AARP New Hampshire really spearheaded. And what that board is tasked with is really trying to understand what is the prescription drug market here in New Hampshire, and how can they work to analyze that information and then maybe help offer, I think it's distributing information to consumers, but then also identifying maybe some solutions that would help drive down the cost of prescription drugs. And so that's something we will certainly continue to work on. And then, one that I am really proud of the work that we do is around fraud prevention. I think that we know that seniors are disproportionately targeted for fraud and scams. And so what our goal when it comes to fraud prevention is how can we help to protect consumers from fraud? First off, that's sort of a general goal of ours. But the way that we do that is sort of twofold, I think. The first is policy solutions. So through the work that we do with our elected officials, trying to identify policy solutions that actually can make a difference in protecting folks against fraudulent attacks. I'll use an example from a bill that we worked on last session that we were really happy to work with the New Hampshire Insurance Department on. It was Senate Bill 515, and it was aimed at providing some more transparency around extended warranty contracts. These are things that we probably have all gotten in the mail, for an extended warranty on your car or whatever it might be. And what this bill really did is it just provided a little bit more transparency for folks that were selling these contracts, and gave some a little bit more authority to the State Department to enforce some of those things.
Kind of weed out people who are maybe not really able to back up financially the promises they make, or to really not make clear what they were covering.
Yep, it was to
not covering.
Yep. I think it was to ensure that folks that were selling these types of contracts were not being fraudulent, in doing that. And so I think that was a really good example of a piece of legislation that we would support that just provides some more safeguards for consumers when it comes to that issue.
If we could only find a way to limit who's calling us and sending us texts and emails, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so I mentioned it was kind of twofold. I think so. There's the policy avenue that we can make a difference, but then there is, really information in our communities, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about kind of how we're communicating with our members. So much of what we do is to provide information, and when it comes to fraud, so much of helping people prevent fraud is literally that word prevention, right? You have to prevent it. That is the most effective way to combat it. And so, we have, a group of our volunteers called the Fraud Fighters, and they are really kind of our experts when it comes to the different common scams. We're in the holiday season right now. Certainly this is a time of the year when folks are maybe targeted more often. And so, what we try to do is have these fraud fighters actually go out all around New Hampshire, talk with senior senators, different community, groups around the state, sharing information. And then certainly through our emails and through our website, we're trying to provide some good information for folks so that if they are, maybe questioning whether or not they, are being targeted by something, they have something they can maybe kind of go back to or a resource they can reference to help them out.
I think we also, AARP worked on some voting legislation.
Yeah.
Took some positions on that.
Yeah, so there was a bill last year. It was House Bill 1264, and it was concerning accessible voting systems. And what these are systems that help folks who are vision impaired, hearing impaired, when they're at the polls, be able to vote independently. And without getting too much into the weeds, effectively, some of our local towns and cities were unable to use these systems during their local elections because these systems were actually owned by the state. And so what our policymakers got together, they realized that this was an issue. And so it was a really good example of where I think that our policymakers identified that this was just common sense, that we needed to change this. And so 1264, what that did is it effectively created a pilot program for this coming year for the local elections for our towns and cities to be able to utilize those accessible voting systems. And then we're going to be working actually this year on kind of a more permanent structure for ensuring that these local towns and cities can continue to use these moving forward.
So, do you think there's any other issues that you wanted to hit on?
I think those really are our priorities. Yeah, and so yeah.
So yeah, we talked about the caregiving and housing, and of course, Social Security and Medicare. Those things are important. So now I think we wanted to talk about how you do this work, because as you said, we aren't endorsing candidates, and we aren't buying lunch. We're not buying tickets to events. We're not contributing to campaigns, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we are just focused on educating.
So how do we?
Issues.
So how do we do it? And
yeah.
Does anything I'm wearing have anything to do with that?
Yeah, no, it's a good reference. So, I think what AARP has really garnered a reputation for in the State House is the sea of red. So you've got your red vest on right now and your red fleece on right now. And so one of the things that we really try to do is say when there are hearings that are happening on bills that we're working on, or we had this really incredible event last year, a legislative lunch, which I think we have a picture of.
Yeah, we have some pictures.
Which is cool, and it's about 40 some odd AARP volunteers. That was in the State House cafeteria, and what we did is we were able to reserve the cafeteria, and when lawmakers broke for lunch that day, they came down and they were greeted by about 40 to 50 AARP volunteers who were there to talk with them about our issues. And so that's really the focus is how can we as an organization offer our members perspective to our lawmakers to help them understand these issues on a more personal level, because it's impossible for our lawmakers to be experts on all the issues that they deal with. I mean, one of the things that's really unique about New Hampshire is there are roughly 1,000 bills that get filed every single session. I mean, that is incredible, and it is literally impossible for our lawmakers to be able to know everything about all of those bills. And so that's really when organizations like AARP come in, and the goal is especially since we're a member-based organization, our members have stories. And they're stories that connect with all the different issues that we work on. So, for example, if we're working on a bill that's dealing with family caregiving, what our goal is to identify some of our volunteers who are caregivers, and then be able to connect them directly with the lawmakers that are working on these bills, because that is the best way for them to really understand how these issues impact people at a personal level. And so that's really what our goal is it's bringing those stories forward to our lawmakers and helping educate them on all of the issues that we're working on.
Yeah. And then now on the with the primary, AARP volunteers also were involved in that kind of voter engagement program. And we have some pictures too of from this campaign and from others where, and I spent some time with that as well. And we kind of engaged in, I don't know if they call it bird dogging or whatever, but basically we had a series of questions, small number of questions on key issues, caregiving and Social Security, Medicare, prescription drugs, and we would, couple volunteers, or we would coordinate what events to go to. AARP time means you show up really early and cover events. We get good seats and ask questions, and the candidates get quite accustomed to seeing us there and to answering our questions. And so we put the time in to doing that, and so I think we have some pictures of that, again, where we make a presence or make our presence known at events, and it's really interesting, and it's great to be part of the process that way. So what would you say if someone wants to find out more? Oh, also, I think if you could talk about there's sort of an advocacy network in terms of getting emails where you can then make your position known. What is that called, or how do you sign up for that?
So, and actually, maybe if I can just go back to the voter engagement work that we do during the elections for just a second. It's such an important part of the process because that election season, that's when, these are the folks that are running to represent us, whether at the state level or at the federal level. And so we go to everything. We go to, the beautiful thing of, the primary here in New Hampshire, we've got, dozens of candidates coming up here running on both sides. And we go to everything. And the goal is to prepare these candidates on our issues, right? You mentioned that, some of the different questions that we would ask. And, the goal of that is to be able to get these candidates thinking about these issues, because they're all coming into this from different perspectives. And whether it might be one candidate maybe has a little bit more familiarity with caregiving or Social Security or some of our issues, but maybe they don't have some familiarity with some of the other issues. And so that's really what that stage is all about, is getting our volunteers out there to go to all these different events and just get these candidates thinking about these issues that we care about, and understanding what their thoughts are, on these issues, and that's all just part of the process of them running for office, and then certainly when folks get into office.
And I think it's also interesting. We're not even saying, oh, we want you to do X or Y on this issue, but it was always more about, we want you to say something about what you think about this issue, which is kind of an interesting approach, and it makes them come up with answers. Yep. And it also happened, I also found it really interesting and gratifying to be involved in the congressional level. And for example, we had an open congressional seat, so we had You had debates. We had AARP was involved in debates and things like that. They brought the candidates out, and we got to ask our questions on those. So I know we're going to run a little late on time here. So how does somebody, if they're interested in getting involved, how would they best reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for them to reach out directly to me. And so, you know, I'll just say my email is M, my first initial, padmore@aarp.org. Send me an email because I would love to work with you. And even if it's you just reaching out and just trying to understand, you know, what are you guys working on and how can I be involved? You know, what I really try to do in my role is meet everyone where they are because everyone who comes into our organization is coming in with a different set of experiences and comfort level with advocacy. And so what I really try to do is make it accessible for everyone. And so, you know, like a great example is, you know, some people are going to go and they're going to testify at a public hearing, and that's great, and we need those folks. But you know what? We also need folks to just show up to those hearings and not say anything. You know, they just need to come and be part of the crowd because that is part of showing our lawmakers that, you know, we've got folks that care about these issues, right? You know, just simply showing up and having a presence. You know, that the State House legislative lunch I mentioned, that was a really good example of that. You know, we had a bunch of people that were talking with lawmakers, you know, at their lunch tables, but we also had some other folks that were just, you know, talking with lawmakers and saying hi, you know, as they were coming in. And so
just greeting,
exactly.
People did what was in their wheelhouse.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's a really important part of it. I take that really seriously because I want folks to have a really open gateway, you know, into this work and learn about this stuff because there's so many different ways that you can make an impact.
Yeah, that's great. There is. I also wanted to suggest that we're going to put up a slide for sort of a general email address for AARP, and I'm going to make a pitch for story ideas for 2025. Story ideas or topics for the show. I'd love to have some suggestions and input on ideas for what to do, what we could be talking about here on Senior Speak New Hampshire. Mike Padmore, thank you very much for coming in. This was a blast. All I need to do is pull a string. You just went to town. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
And Happy New Year to everybody.